let's talk about the Bulldog defense. Defensive line, and this could be interesting because I'm very curious to see Will Whitson, Trevion Williams, both bigger guys, not quite 300 pounds, but getting close to that point. Does Zach Arnett keep them as defensive ends in the way that they were playing defensive end in the previous defense? Because there are some personnel defenses in the way they do some things. I think it would make sense. I think Whitson is, for his size, 295 is still pretty lean and has really good get off. I think you could put him at the edge and is really explosive in that role. I also think you probably want to play him there, frankly, just because, how much do you trust some of the guys stepping in behind him as these transfers? Are they ready to go right away? We'll see. But I think Whitson has the ability to be that player off the edge. Now, maybe you play him more as a 4-eye inside the tackle, in which case you might shift things up a little bit. But I think you could put him as a true edge. And I'm going to stick with that for now. Really what I'm going with is, how do I create the most talented possible lineup for State's defensive line? Because, look, they have a lot more guys who are more D-tackle or nose tackle types than they do true defensive ends. But, frankly, look, when you're doing a 3-down front, you need some of those bigger bodies up front. So I think Whitson is going to be one of those guys, and I'll keep him starting at defensive end. But Trevion Williams backing him up. Jason Jenkins and Gus Cordova as your transfers coming in. Jenkins is a guy that we've talked about, showed flashes at Tennessee in 2024, led to him getting an opportunity with Florida State last season, didn't capitalize on it the way that they would have liked him to, and ultimately I think lost the job by the end of the year. You're hoping now his return to the SEC, I don't think you're counting on him to come in and be a starter. I think you were hoping, can he be a player that gets back to what he showed when he was at Tennessee as a rotational player? Can he make a negative play every now and then to really create some havoc for the offense? And then Gus Cordova is sort of the same way. And just that he's a high-ceiling young player. Look, maybe he steps in and is immediately able to make an impact and earn his way up the depth chart based on the profile he had coming out of high school. But right now sort of have them as those depth pieces at defensive end. Nose guard, and look, nose guard, defensive tackle, we'll see how Zach Arnett tries to shake this up. I stuck with Jere Bledsoe there in the middle as that 315-pounder, kind of the biggest guy of who I imagine to be the starters. Look, I've talked about it. I'm sort of on the Jere Bledsoe island that I'm going to be on his hype train. I think there's a lot of potential there. Was not always dominant by any means, but made enough plays over the course of the season. I think he's someone that it was good for Mississippi State to get him back, and I think he's got a chance to be a really nice player for them along the interior of that defense. Calvin Dinkins backing him up the same way they had it a year ago. Went with Diesel Moy as a depth chart, who did play quite a bit for State this past season within the rotation. One of your bigger guys at 340-plus pounds. I don't know what type of impact he's going to make, but I'm sure that's a guy that sort of rotates there. D-tackle, D'Alen Evans, I think sort of takes over that starting role, stepping in from Texas A&M. Another guy with a high ceiling, high potential. Didn't really show it yet at Texas A&M, but a guy that people in Aggieland were excited about the opportunity in it and felt he was going to be able to compete for a starting job this year. He's coming into Mississippi State, and I think he's going to be one of your starters. One of the more purely talented players up front. DJ Reed backing him up, another guy that last year as a sophomore, transfer out of Auburn, kind of surprised people. Nobody really felt like when he signed, that's a guy that was going to make an impact, but made some nice plays for State, showed some flashes. So keep him there. And then Colin Coates is another depth piece. Once you get past those top guys, it kind of becomes a little bit more interesting. But, obviously, look, if either Jenkins or Cordova were to be guys at end, and, I'd be surprised, but if either of that happens, well, then Whitson and Williams sort of could factor in to those interior positions as well. Sam linebacker, and looking at the linebacker room, I mean, we've talked about this guy a lot because there's sort of all the hype and conversation in the world. And I say all the hype in the world because State didn't feel the need to go and get anybody else. Amari Williams coming over from Florida State. This is a guy that clearly Zach Arnett thinks very highly of. And that if you put him in this spot, fully develop him for an offseason to play as an edge rusher, he's going to thrive. And someone, look, Florida State fans didn't want to lose and felt that there's that potential there. It's all potential, not production. But it seems like State has zeroed in as Amari Williams to be their dude at Sam linebacker. So right now, that's where I'm going to project him. There's been conversation at Darian Gillette stepping in as playing that Sam linebacker spot, being another guy there. one of the bigger guys you had of the guys who played, off-ball linebacker this past season, bigger frame, which fits that spot a little bit more. Tyshawn Willis, I mean, that's kind of the position he played coming out of high school, and he was a highly talented player coming out, but obviously the past year did not play. So could he project to be the guy? And I went ahead and put Micah Nickerson there, man. Obviously recently got upgraded to a high 4-star for Mississippi State, one of the top players in his class. A true pass rush demon is sort of what he does. It's just a matter of, can he get the weight on? Can you get him up being, 230 plus pounds? And look, I think you really want a guy that's bigger than that, frankly. But David Bailey for Texas Tech is going to be a first-round draft pick this coming year, and he measured in at 230 pounds at the Senior Bowl, playing sort of that defensive end edge rush position. So if Nickerson can get on, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, and obviously, got to be able to defend the run. That's a big thing I continue to harp on. You would prefer that they show some ability to drop into coverage as well. But if he's that guy that can get after a quarterback, I think he's going to have an opportunity as a freshman to contribute, especially when State needs guys to be pass rushers. Mike linebacker, Sakari Tillman. I think Arnett likes to have his Mike be a guy that's just attacking, get downhill, get in your face. And I think that's what Sakari does. Jalen Smith backing him up, was the backup at Mike this past season. Both those guys going to play a lot. Tyler Lockhart starting at will linebacker. And again, another guy that I think is just going to earn a starting role this year, showed a lot of potential as a freshman. So put him there with his old high school teammate and buddy Fat Forrest there backing him up. I'd be interested to see where else they could turn at linebacker as maybe some other options. But these are probably your top 4 guys along the interior. In terms of the off-ball linebacker spots, especially now, look, Gillette could be at any one of these spots as well if they don't move him to Sam. But I think they want to put somebody there to get some depth there. Looking at cornerback, I mean, this one, it's really simple and easy to break down, right? Kelly Jones is going to be your guy. You know that. You got a future first-round pick at one of those spots at corner. Massive that State was able to get him back. Quentin Taylor, I think, is who goes opposite of him. The one guy that you've brought in that has that starting experience at the power conference level, performed well for Iowa State. To me, those are your top 2 corners on this team. I think Jet Jefferson is probably one of your top backups. If you remember going into last year, there was a lot of hype for Jet coming out of fall camp, that he had really solidified himself as probably the number 2 behind Kelly Jones, and obviously suffered an injury, had to miss some time, ended up only playing 4 games, took his red shirt. But if that potential is still there, that's a guy who could step in and be a starter for you at one of those corner spots. Could he battle Quentin Taylor? I think it's either Quentin Taylor or Jet Jefferson. Right now, I'm going to favor Taylor just off the starting experience. But I think Jefferson's going to play a lot for you. Caleb Singleton played a lot as a true freshman at Syracuse. High talent ceiling, probably one of your top backups. And then your depth guys, look, Jamrock Grimsley, again, high ceiling player, has battled some injuries, hasn't all put it together yet, but he's probably going to factor in the rotation. And then as a redshirt freshman, Kyle Johnson, who was obviously a big-time signee for Mississippi State a couple of going into this past season, took a redshirt as a true freshman, only played in 2 games. Is he ready to factor in as one of your more talented players there? So, look, there's a lot of talent in this cornerback room for sure. And the fact that you've got a true, like a future first-rounder, another guy that's a quality power conference starter, and then 4 other guys that you feel good about from a talent standpoint as guys who are capable of contributing on this level, you're in a good spot there. Corey Bell deserves a lot of credit for helping to turn this room around. I think cornerback, you're in a really solid spot. Safety could be, interesting for State. Dog safety, which is that middle safety within this defense, the guy who's kind of playing that hybrid linebacker safety spot, can either fill down to the box, drop back deep in the middle of the field in coverage. That's Isaac Smith all day. And I think Isaac Smith, like, this is a position that is where you expect to see a guy be a tackling machine. That's what Isaac Smith is going to be. But I also thought last year Smith showed some ability in coverage more than he has previously in his career. So you have that versatility there to drop him back into the deep middle of the field as well. But I think Isaac Smith is going to be your guy at that dog safety spot. Kendall Dolby, as the transfer from Oklahoma, I think is who backs him up there. Dolby played the cheetah position at Oklahoma, which is kind of similar. A guy that you're getting involved as a box safety frequently. And Dolby working back from injuries, probably not a guy that you want to put a ton on right away. And you're probably not a guy you're expecting to start right away. Well, look, he's only got the 1 year. Probably not a guy you're expecting to start because of that injury history, but still someone that I think State can absolutely see factor into that role. So I've got him backing up Isaac Smith. At field safety, Marcus Williams from Rice. And that's kind of that. For Arnett, it's not really field safety strong or free safety, strong safety. It's kind of he has the field safety and he has the boundary safety. So field side is the more open side. If you're on one hash, if you're on the left hash, the field side is to your right and your boundary is to your left. Basically, depending on which hash you're on, which sideline is closer. The closer sideline is the boundary. The further sideline is the field. And when it comes to splitting up field and boundary, the reason teams sort of go to that more so than a true free safety, strong safety these days is it really just requires two different skill sets. You really need your guys to be able to do both, ideally do both, but there are some differences where with the field safety, you want a guy that's got some range to him. You want a guy that's comfortable playing a deep half of the field, deep middle of the field. You also want a guy that's more comfortable in coverage because he's going to have more coverage responsibilities in that role. Boundary safety, a guy that the bigger thing here is that he's more confined to part of the field, so it's not as pressing that he's a lockdown coverage player. But you also are going to get more involved in the run fit when you're into the boundary because to that side of the field, you typically have less numbers as a defense, so your boundary safety play a bigger role getting involved and going and making tackles. Marcus Williams played as a field safety at Rice. Jordan Gilbert played as a boundary safety at LSU. So I'm kind of just sticking these guys where they had been previously at their old spots. We'll see how Arnett works them in. That field safety for Arnett kind of ends up playing as a nickelback a lot of the time, which is something Marcus Williams had experience with. Rice sort of played him as that deep middle of the field player, but there were times Rice would put him down and have him play as a nickel corner. So I think that's the role you're going to get with him there. And again, with Gilbert playing more to the boundary. At backups, I think Braylon Womack's going to have an opportunity to play a ton as a true freshman. And look, he was sort of, again, that deep middle of the field player playing for last year coming out of high school. But he's also a guy that I've talked about it a lot, this idea of him having the coverage skills to be someone that could be a cover player right away and give you some ability to play in sort of a nickel type role. So I think that's where he's going to back up. And Tanner Johnson just is the most veteran guy that you've got in the room coming back is who I've got there as your backup at boundary safety. I went ahead and did put special teams. Kyle Ferry, Ethan Pulliam, kind of knew that. I won't get into kick returner, breaking any of that down right now. But so my starting defense, defensive end, Will Whitson, nose guard, Jere Bledsoe, defensive tackle, Dalen Evans, Sam linebacker, Amari Williams, Mike linebacker, Zachary Tillman, Will linebacker, Tyler Lockhart, cornerback, Kelly Jones and Quentin Taylor Jr., dog safety, Isaac Smith, field safety, Marcus Williams, boundary safety, Jordan Gilbert. That is my projections for Mississippi State's starting defense.